1. Pentium 4 NetBurst. The Pentium 4's NetBurst architecture was Intel's attempt at pure speed domination. Clock speed became king. Intel promised gigahertz heaven, but reality had other plans. The NetBurst cores generated obscene amounts of heat. Laptops and desktops became little space heaters. Users joked that their computers could cook eggs faster than run Doom. NetBurst's high clock speeds didn't translate to proportional performance gains. Applications couldn't fully utilize the architecture, and heat throttling often reduced speeds to what we'd consider mediocre by modern standards. It was like buying a Ferrari that slows down every time you hit 60 mph. Despite its flaws, NetBurst taught Intel valuable lessons about efficiency over raw speed. Mobile and desktop CPUs eventually pivoted to shorter pipelines and lower power designs, paving the way for Core and Core 2 series. NetBurst is remembered as flashy, hot, and mostly underwhelming, the CPU equivalent of a movie with amazing trailers but terrible plot. 2. Itanium. The Itanium was Intel's most ambitious flop. Marketed as the next-generation architecture for enterprise servers, it promised incredible performance with its EPIC, explicitly parallel instruction computing design. The catch? EPIC required software to be rewritten to fully exploit the architecture. Most software didn't bother. Enterprises that adopted Itanium found performance underwhelming, compatibility a nightmare, and cost astronomically high. Developers called it Itanium behind closed doors. Itanium lingered for years, mostly in legacy systems, but never lived up to the hype. Itanium's legacy is a cautionary tale. Even billion-dollar R&D can fail if ecosystem and software adoption aren't considered. Intel eventually retired Itanium quietly, leaving engineers to shake their heads and whisper, "At least we learned something." 3. Pentium M. The original Pentium M cores were designed for laptops. They were low power, efficient, and ran cooler than NetBurst counterparts. Sounds perfect, right? The problem was market confusion. Intel initially positioned Pentium M as a niche mobile CPU, while marketing and product lines were all over the place. Some early Pentium M laptops were fantastic, running cool and battery friendly, but the CPU didn't have widespread recognition. Consumers often opted for flashy Pentium 4 or early Core Duo machines, not realizing the real value hidden in efficiency. Pentium M eventually evolved into the core of Intel's mobile success, but early adopters got lost in the shuffle. 4. Prescott Core. Prescott was the ill-fated evolution of NetBurst. Intel tried to cram more features, higher clock speeds, and larger caches into the same thermal envelope. Result: overheating, heat throttling, and power consumption that made desktops sound like jet engines. Users reported blue screens, unexpected shutdowns, and CPU fans spinning at jet turbine levels. Prescott became synonymous with, "Why did I upgrade again?" Even software that ran fine on older Pentium 4s struggled with the heat output. Prescott demonstrated that chasing higher clock speeds without efficiency is a recipe for disaster. 5. Early Intel Atom. Atom CPUs were Intel's foray into low-power netbooks. They succeeded in battery life, but failed spectacularly in performance. Browsing the web felt like navigating through molasses. Opening multiple tabs crashed even the most patient users. Atom taught Intel the importance of balancing efficiency and speed. Later designs improved dramatically, powering smartphones, tablets, and embedded devices. But those first netbook experiences left a generation of users questioning if Intel understood how usable a CPU needed to be. 6. Larrabee. Larrabee was Intel's ambitious attempt to enter the discrete GPU market, a world dominated by NVIDIA and AMD. Intel promised a revolutionary many-core processor capable of high-performance graphics rendering and scientific computation. On paper, it sounded incredible. Dozens of cores designed for parallel processing, flexibility for both graphics and compute workloads, and the ability to run familiar x86 code. But reality was brutal. Larrabee's architecture required developers to rethink how they programmed graphics. Traditional GPU pipelines were optimized for fixed-function graphics tasks, whereas Larrabee's cores demanded software to explicitly handle parallelization and memory management. Many developers struggled, and performance often lagged behind GPUs already on the market. Intel continued refining prototypes, but by the time Larrabee was ready, NVIDIA and AMD had widened the performance gap. Instead of revolutionizing consumer graphics, Larrabee pivoted into a niche high-performance computing role as Xeon Phi. It became a lesson in ambition versus market readiness, a chip too ahead of its time, misunderstood by by developers and beaten by competitors with established ecosystems. Despite its failure, Larrabee introduced concepts that influenced Intel's later GPU projects, particularly the Z architecture. Engineers remember Larrabee as a bold experiment, technically brilliant, frustratingly impractical, and a warning that even a giant like Intel can stumble when entering a specialized, entrenched market. 7. Pentium D. Pentium D was Intel's first dual-core desktop processor built on the aging NetBurst architecture. Dual cores sounded like a dream, twice the processing power, better multitasking, and improved performance for heavy workloads. In practice, it inherited all of NetBurst's flaws: heat, high power consumption, and inefficient pipelines. Desktops running Pentium D often sounded like they were powering a jet engine. Overheating was common, causing thermal throttling and occasional crashes. Enthusiasts quickly discovered that AMD's Athlon 64X2 offered better performance per watt, leaving Intel's dual-core flagship looking bloated and outdated. Despite these issues, Pentium D taught Intel valuable lessons about architecture evolution. Future dual-core designs focused on efficiency and performance balance, leading to the Core 2 Duo and beyond. Pentium D is remembered fondly by some as a transitional chip, a bridge between the glory of single-core speed obsession and the practical multi-core era, but mostly as a cautionary tale in thermal management and marketing overhype. 8. Early Intel Atom. The first generation Intel Atom processors were designed for low-power netbooks. They succeeded in delivering long battery life, but were painfully slow. Opening a browser or multitasking felt like watching paint dry. Early netbooks running Atom often struggled with basic web applications, causing frustration for users who expected modern performance in a tiny package. Despite this, Atom had a vision: bring Intel CPUs into mobile computing, embedded systems, and ultra-thin laptops. The early hiccups taught Intel that low power alone doesn't make a chip successful. Performance, optimization, and user experience are equally critical. Atom eventually evolved into a viable platform powering tablets, IoT devices, and thin laptops, but those early netbooks left an enduring reputation for slowness. Humorously, tech blogs often compared Atom netbooks to PCs on sedatives, highlighting the gap between potential and reality. Atom's story reminds engineers that being first isn't enough. Execution, software optimization, and market perception define success. 9. Broadwell-Y. Broadwell-Y targeted ultra-low power devices like fanless laptops and tablets. Intel promised thin designs, low heat, and respectable performance. The reality was trickier. Performance improvements were minimal compared to previous generations, and some devices still suffered heat throttling despite low TDPs. Consumers found pricing steep for performance that sometimes lagged behind older chips. Developers and tech reviewers noted that Broadwell-Y's architecture required careful thermal management in ultra-thin designs. Devices like fanless 2-in-1s showed promise, but rarely delivered the expected user experience. Broadwell-Y became a case study in the challenges of low-power chip design, balancing thermal constraints, clock speeds, and real-world workloads. Despite the failure, Broadwell-Y influenced later designs like Skylake-Y and Lakefield, improving efficiency and form factor compatibility. It serves as a reminder that ultra-low power innovation often comes at the cost of immediate mainstream appeal, and early adopters are sometimes the ones paying for lessons Intel learned the hard way. 10. Cannon Lake. Cannon Lake was Intel's long-awaited first 10nm chip. Promises included higher efficiency, better battery life, and performance gains over 14nm predecessors. The launch, however, was plagued with delays, low yields, and minimal real-world improvements. Only a handful of Cannon Lake CPUs made it to market, mostly in laptops that failed to impress. Tech enthusiasts joked about Cannon Lake as the mythical chip that almost existed. Performance gains over Kaby Lake were negligible, and software often failed to utilize the new architecture effectively. Cannon Lake became a symbol of Intel's struggles with manufacturing process nodes and a cautionary tale for corporate overconfidence. Yet Cannon Lake wasn't entirely wasted. Lessons learned informed Ice Lake and subsequent architectures, helping Intel overcome 10nm production hurdles. The story of Cannon Lake underscores that even giants stumble, and innovation requires not just design brilliance, but execution excellence. Failed Intel CPUs remind us that innovation without execution is a recipe for disappointment. Heat, performance gaps, poor timing, and unrealistic marketing doomed some of Intel's boldest projects. Yet each flop taught lessons that shaped modern CPUs: efficiency, thermal management, realistic marketing, and the importance of software-hardware synergy. From NetBurst to Cannon Lake, Intel's failures are as as fascinating as its successes. Full of drama, technical quirks, and stories that tech enthusiasts love to tell, they're a testament to trial, error, and eventual triumph in the world of computing.